Hi, this is Chris Hoy. Thank you for joining me on Create with Chris. Today I will be showing you how to improve every painting with just a few simple steps. I've had a lot of questions about base coating and wanted to dive into it just a little bit deeper to share how important it is to not skip this critical step in the beginning of every project. I think one of the most important steps when beginning a new project is preparing the surface correctly. Because I use MDF or wood-based product, I always use a multi-purpose sealer before I begin any project. Whenever moisture is applied to a wood-based product, it's going to cause the grain to rise just a little bit, and it creates almost a rough, similar to a sandpaper texture on the surface. When the multi-purpose sealer is applied, after it's dry, a light buff with a fine grip sandpaper is going to provide an extra smooth surface. Now there's a couple reasons that using a multi-purpose sealer is beneficial. Number one, it's going to ensure that the paint will adhere well. It's going to provide a nice barrier that will prevent the grain from rising. And probably about 20 years ago I learned a life lesson. I painted a piece quickly. I decided I was going to skip using the multi-purpose sealer. It was a Christmas project. It was absolutely adorable. After I was finished, put it away in the attic. Next year I got it out and it was like someone had dumped sand on it. It was absolutely awful and there was no salvation. I had to sand it and repaint it. Made me a believer in using a sealer to begin with. In addition, this will provide a smooth surface. Once you put it on and it dries, lightly buff it with sandpaper. It's so much more gentle on the bristles of your brushes. And if you put any investment in your brushes, you want to make sure that you do take good care of them. This is probably the best solution to ensuring that your brushes are going to last a long time. Also, when you use a sealer, because it seals the surface, it also ensures that you will not use as much product. So you will probably cut back on the amount of paint that you use because this seals it and there's not any paint that's going to go into the grain of the wood. It's just going to lay on the top, and you'll be surprised at how much less paint is required when you use a good sealer. Plus, you're not going to need as many coats to cover. To seal the surface, and I just kind of sectioned this off into different areas, I can use as big a brush as I want for this. And my brush is just slightly damp, so I do that for two reasons. Number one, if the brush has moisture in it, it's not going to fill up with product, so the product's going to stay pretty much on the outside of the brush instead of filling the whole brush up and then you just use a little bit and again you've wasted a lot of product. I've had this bottle for at least a year and I've only used half of it. I use it every single day. So it does last a long time if you use it wisely. I use brushes that have a soft bristle. These are the Jo Sonja short wash brush and the bristles on it are very soft, almost like a makeup brush. My two favorite ones, you can tell by how much I've used them by the way the handles appear. I've seen so many people take a small brush to do their base coating and their application of the sealer. Oh my goodness. Just get a brush and you can whip it out in no time. And you can see how long it's going to take when you go like this to kind of seal that, or if you just go nice long strokes. That's another key. Nice long strokes. I have a slightly dampened brush. I'm going to load just a little bit of that sealer in it. And you can see I'm not pressing hard, just putting nice, smooth, even strokes over it. Go ahead and do both sides here. I'm going to do a couple different things. The oval wash, if I'm using smaller surfaces and I don't want to have to get the big brush out, you can see how quickly that also covers. And I have a little bit of moisture in the brush. I've loaded it well and it covers very well. I do use my heated tool to expedite the drying. It's super hot and it does dry quickly, but this definitely speeds up the dry time. I like to make the most of my painting time, so I try to find tools that are going to ensure that I get a nice end product, and it's going to make my painting world a little bit less stressful. Now, if I rub my hand over these areas that I've applied the sealer to, I can feel just a little bit of grain. Just going to lightly sand that, and that's all it takes. So it doesn't take a lot of time to very quickly seal this and sand it smooth. Once that's nice and smooth, the base coat is ready to be applied. Now, I will say with the MDF, over aggressive sanding that digs down past the surface of the board will cause a lot of issues. So light-handed sanding, very fine grit sandpaper, it will be perfect. Now, you can mix a color in with the sealer to help base coat smoothly. That sometimes will knock down a prep step, but I usually just grab the sealer and do a quick seal, and then I'm good to go with whatever color I choose. I'm using the 1.5" short wash. Just going to pull long, even strokes. What I have found out to get a nice coverage, keep the direction of the brush going one way. If you go this way, and you do this and add this, you get that choppy look. Now that might be something you're going for, but when it dries, it's going to be blotchy, as opposed to having a nice smooth coverage. It's always better to do light coats as opposed to one heavy coat. Again, with the bigger brush, it just goes so very quickly. I never try to achieve a solid coverage with one coat of paint. Always has much better results if there's a couple light layers of paint. This one's already smooth and even when I put my second coat on. It's probably going to be pretty close to the final coat. And white is hard to cover. You all know that. Look how nice that looks. Over here, I'm not sure, because I did the kind of a choppy float. If I just try to fill that in without being careful on my brush strokes, I'm still going to have kind of a choppy mess. Now, if the paint starts to drag and you're not able to have nice smooth floats, pick up a little bit of water on the brush, not a lot. I know there's a lot of you that live in areas where the climate is very arid, and it does make a difference in the dry time. If you need to extend your open time, Josonia Fast Drying Glaze Medium is a very good product to use. Not a big fan of just plain glazing medium because it takes such a long time for it to dry. And with this, it just gives you that little more open time, but still has the benefits of the glaze medium, which is excellent. So you can see the difference between keeping the strokes consistent and smooth as opposed to not being very careful, just trying to get it covered up quickly. If I am using the oval wash to apply my paint, it's a smaller brush. I'm still going to keep those strokes going in the same direction. I work quickly so that one area doesn't dry before I overlap it with fresh paint. And I can keep those strokes going nice and smooth. My brush is starting to drag a little bit. Just want to pick up a little extra moisture. Because this is still damp, I can go back over it and smooth it out. Again, if I just am not careful about my brush strokes and kind of go this way, that way, and it's real easy to want to do that just to fill in the color. Now, if you want that look of a little bit of movement, this is a great way to achieve that, but it will turn out kind of messy if you're not careful because it dries light and dark and gets a little bit blotchy. It will take me less time to add 3 coats using a big brush than it will 1 coat with a smaller brush. There's no brush stroke marks on this because these bristles are super soft. going to be a beautiful background base. I always say it's a great idea to think ahead, to try to prevent extra work in the long run. Sometimes if a paint is put on too thick, you're going to get ridges or marks on the paint. Instead of using water, it's a nice thick paint. Instead of using water to put nice smooth strokes on, it gets a little bit thick and heavy, and then it's going to be what I call ridgy, where it has those ridges where the paint is thicker and heavier in some areas and thinner in others. Because my paint is so loose, it's very workable. Now there is a break point in the paint, and by that I mean if there's too much moisture in it, it causes the paint to break down, and then you lose that consistency and coverage. If you need more open time, I also use a distress sprayer, and it sprays a light mist as opposed to a heavy spray from a regular spray bottle. This is just kind of a soft, just a quiet mist, and it's a very light coverage, and it makes it really nice just to add that hint of moisture, not only on the surface, but if your palette is starting to dry out, it's a great way to keep that fluid a little bit longer. I hope you can see the difference between these swatches. With this one, I used the big brush, and I was not consistent with my brush strokes. With this side, I just went straight across, kept all of my brush strokes in the same direction. With the second set of swatches, I used the smaller oval wash, and you can see with 2 layers of paint, just not quite enough. The big brush is going to cover better, it's going to cover smoother, but sometimes we need to bump down to smaller brushes just because of the area that is being covered. A smaller brush, it works fine. Just keep those same rules in mind. Long, smooth strokes, don't stop and start in the middle. Pull it all the way across. If you do stop and start in the middle, make sure you blend them together, and you will get a perfect coverage. Over here, I think you can see where these brush strokes are light and dark, and that's simply because the paint was applied thicker and thinner in areas. This is going to take, I have 2 coats, 3 coats, 2 coats, 2 coats. So if I go back in with another coat on here, and I just lay it in, just kind of thick and heavy, not paying attention to my strokes, I'm still going to get a choppy finish. It's not going to be smooth and beautiful. My favorite part is pulling off the tape so that these different sections can be easily visualized. All of these sections have the multi-purpose sealer underneath them, but I will tell you, had I not put the sealer on, these would be even a little bit more rough. You can see the difference in the paint background, how smooth and consistent this is, because I used a bigger brush, which equals less brush strokes. It's going to be smoother, it's going to be more consistent. With this one, I just bumped down to a smaller brush. It's still, by using those consistent, smooth strokes, I'm still achieving a much nicer, smoother background. Base coating boils down to simple, easy steps. Number 1, always seal the surface, let it dry, lightly sand it with a low grit sandpaper. Might take 5 minutes. It's well worth it. It's the best 5 minutes that you'll invest in the project. When the base coat is applied, use as big of a brush as the area will permit. If you have a simple surface, big brushes, don't be afraid to use big brushes. Long, smooth, consistent strokes. Don't stop and start in the middle. Keep those strokes flowing and smooth. You will use less product. You will have a better results. It's going to take a lot less time. If the paint is not flowing well, you can use fast dry glaze medium, a distress mister, sprayer, or just a little bit of moisture in the brush. It's going to help the paint to flow. Work quickly, let those brush strokes meld together, blend them smoothly. Use light layers of paint. Don't try to pile on heavy layers of paint straight from the bottle. Smooth it out, let the brush do the work. You're just going to steer it in the right direction. If you use these simple tips to apply your backgrounds, everything will work together to ensure that the results are perfect, and it's going to eliminate a lot of unnecessary work. I can crank out a perfect background in just a matter of a few minutes, as opposed to, if I'm not careful, it's going to take a lot of time to clean it up and straighten it up and make it look nice and even. So hopefully you can take these tips into your painting world to make your painting life a little bit easier. Your projects are going to look a lot better, and everybody's going to be so impressed with your amazing talent. Thank you for joining me today. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and hit the bell to subscribe. That way you won't miss out in future videos. If you have any suggestions or ideas for upcoming videos, let me know. I'll be happy to take a look at them. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together.